I have a serious question for you. Have you ever witnessed very bad public behavior? By this I mean perhaps someone pushing an old lady out of the way to get to the front of a queue. Somebody going to a buffet and emptying out the entire plate of fruit or something like that, not leaving anything for anyone else. Somebody spitting on the floor in a restaurant. Somebody hitting someone with their car, knocking them off their bicycle and then just driving off without stopping to see if the person is okay. If you did, what did you think? Did you try to say something? Did you try to stop them? Did you just turn a blind eye and carry on? All of those scenarios and more are things that I've personally witnessed living in China over the last 14 plus years. They're so common that I've actually managed to film most of those things. Animal cruelty, people spitting, blowing their noses on the streets, public urination, all this kind of stuff. I filmed it just walking around in the big cities of China. I'm not even going to rural places to try and find this. I mean, if I went to rural places specifically, I could film this kind of bad behavior all day. The thing is, I don't want this video to be a critique to criticize people and to say China is bad because people are backwards and behave badly. I want to try and explain to all of you why it is that this behavior still continues to this day, even though China itself has raised up into more of a middle class, more financially powerful sort of a society. Why do these bad behaviors still persist? And is there any way to stop them? You have to understand Chinese society before we even get into this. You know, Chinese society, it's a tough one. There are a lot of people living there, a hell of a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are still living in poverty there. In fact, a massive amount of people still live in what Western people would consider abject poverty. A lot of people in the middle class now, and of course, most people are in a decent kind of a living situation. Even the poor people still are taken care of in China. It's been an economic miracle, as we all know, in China. But the way things work in Chinese society is people don't get involved in other people's business. That's how somehow you haven't had just mass chaos in China. Of course, the heavy-handed government practices, etc., all kind of are part of this. But what happens is, if you get involved, say for instance you see somebody get hit by a car, right? If you run over to try and help the person who's been injured and they accuse you of injuring them, you and your entire extended family could get into a lot of trouble, and you'd actually have to pay compensation and financially support that person, and it could really bankrupt you. You know, if you have an opinion that goes against the Chinese government, you're not only putting yourself in danger, but your entire extended family. So the way China's society has evolved, it's evolved to a point where people are very insular. In other words, you care about yourself, and then you care about your close family, that's about it. And by care about yourself, I mean you really are incredibly selfish. When you see somebody doing something bad, it's always like, not my business, I don't want to get into trouble, I'm just going to carry on my merry way, I'm not going to care about them, I'm not going to care about that, I'm going to let them behave badly because, you know, it's got nothing to do with me. And it's also at the same time created a very weird sort of situation where it's also emboldened people that have bad behavior. Because everything's so insular, no one's ever stopped people. I mean, let's just be honest, if you go around being an ass your whole life and no one says to you, hey, you're being an ass, you're going to think it's normal and you're going to continue doing it. And until somebody stops you, you're not going to stop. So that's what happens, is you get people who exhibit bad behavior. And if anyone ever challenges them, like I do challenge bad behavior in China, I have on multiple occasions, you can actually see in my videos. But when somebody challenges these people, they get belligerent because they're like, who the hell are you to tell me I'm not allowed to spit at the table or smoke in the elevator or smoke in the hospital, etc., etc. You see, this is the core problem, is that people are too insular in China. It's so weird. It's such an interesting society because Chinese society will come together in an instant whenever they feel collectively shamed or collectively insulted. So if I as a foreigner go there and say, hey, that's disgusting what you're doing right there, they'll all suddenly form a flash mob, and that'll be the end of me. Probably be sent home in a bloody pulp in a body bag, you know what I mean? But when it comes to actually helping each other, they don't. Like in real life, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've rescued children on the subway that were part of a drug trafficking, weird kind of a thing going on, a kidnapping ring. That was a while ago. I've done all sorts of things in China which I couldn't believe other people wouldn't step in to help. I've stopped thieves, you know, I've broken up fights, people doing unsafe crazy, stupid things in front of children, and with children present, I've put a stop to it. And that's just my sort of Western meddling kind of upbringing, I suppose. When I see something bad, I have to put a stop to it. You know, if it's in my power. Obviously, I can't stop everything, but you know, just basic things. Problem is, in China, people don't get involved. So I've seen an old man collapse on the side of the road at the subway. Nobody helped the guy. I had to go help lift him up. And only when the foreigner, me, started to lift him up, other people joined. But before I started to do it, nobody else was going to get involved. You see, that's the core problem here. But now, I want to turn this around a bit. And I want to say just how difficult it is to break out of that as a Chinese person. So I understand. Society is working against you. Society is working against you if you're a decent person who wants to change these bad behaviors. You yourself can practice good behaviors all you want, but it's not going to change the fact that you've got 100 people around you who are doing, you know, public urination, spitting, pushing in the queues, doing all these kind of things. It's really disheartening, because if everyone else is doing it, why should you put in the effort to be better than the others around you? You know, I understand that. It's a struggle that I have myself. Driving in China taught me that very quickly, that if I was trying to be polite all the time, I would get nowhere. I had to learn to drive more aggressively. I had to learn to drive like a, excuse my bad language, but I had to learn how to drive like a complete arsehole. And I thought I drove like a complete arsehole in South Africa and Johannesburg. I was wrong. I had to up my game to 11. It was the only way that I could survive in Chinese traffic. You know, that's why things aren't going to change anytime soon. And that's why it's so difficult for these bad behaviors to go away. You see, I recently talked about it in my video when I was talking about Hong Kong and mainland China. And I was saying how mainland China versus Hong Kong, civility is the main word that came to mind when I speak about Hong Kong. And that is because you don't see that kind of behavior as commonly in Hong Kong as you do in mainland China. Now, what that resulted in was immediately hundreds of comments on my video from mainland Chinese who felt that I had insulted China by saying that, you know, Chinese people are lacking when it comes to being civil. Well, the fact of the matter is, just in strength of numbers, if you compare Hong Kong and mainland China, it's absolutely true. You can't deny it. Anyone who's been into mainland China and then gone into Hong Kong will tell you that the more spitting per capita in mainland China, it's like 1 billion to 1. It's completely different, right? Now, here's what I'm trying to get at is those comments, they started to insult me. They started to say, what about the homeless people in San Francisco that's, you know, defecate in public? What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? At the end of the day, completely self-defeating, because you can say what about this, what about that, all you want. It doesn't change the fact that the reality is that these bad behaviors are rampant still in mainland China and need to come to a stop at some point, at least if you want to call yourself a civilized society. Because you cannot defend these kinds of bad behaviors. You can try to say, you can make excuses for them. Yeah, okay, maybe people are uneducated. Maybe there's no incentive for them to change. But that's an excuse, right? That's simply saying, oh, you know, oh, look, that kid's only 2 years old, so he can't solve mathematical equations. That's totally okay. But when you've got an adult who can't add 2 plus 2, it's kind of harder to make an excuse for them, if you know what I mean. So you can't defend it. You can make excuses, but don't defend it. Don't come and tell me like, that's okay. It's okay to be rude to your elders. It's okay to push people out of the way. It's okay to grab till there's nothing left. It's not okay. Nobody in their right mind will ever say that that kind of behavior is okay. So I just wanted to put that out there. However, what I'd like to add to all of this is the amount of respect I have for the Chinese people that I see around me living in China, actually trying to not only make sure that they themselves don't exhibit this kind of bad, uncultured behavior, but they are teaching their children how to behave correctly. They're helping others around them by setting an example. I have a huge amount of respect for you because, you know, there is no real incentive to be that way when you have a society that not only seems to allow it, but also condones it and defends this kind of bad behavior. So you guys got a huge amount of respect from me. A huge, huge shout out to all the young people in China who are making a change. I know a lot of you guys are embarrassed about these kind of things, and I understand it's not your fault that you've got some uneducated or uncultured countrymen who go overseas and give you guys a bad name, or who happen to be walking in front of my camera as I walk around the streets in China, spitting and doing all these horrible things. It's not your fault. a huge shout out to you. And I would like everybody else to acknowledge that there is this growing sort of young group of people that are raising up China's sophistication and civility. And I'm talking about people that are kind of my age, a little bit younger, you know, the up and coming people. I have seen massive strides in your generation when it comes to being civil and polite, well behaved in public. I mean, I know I sound condescending at the moment or whatever, but I'm just being completely honest. Straight from the heart. You guys are the future of China. You guys are the hope that China's society can change into one that is civilized, polite, and right there above the rest of the world. It's up to you guys. So I'm keeping a close eye, obviously. You know, my wife is of your generation. I have a lot of respect for you guys. I have a lot of respect for my wife, and I have a lot of respect for the people that are willing to change. So guys, until I see you next time, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.